Hi, this is David Willner.
I'm Barnea, Levi, Selavan.
This is a new podcast production of the LandMinds show. We welcome you. Hope to do this every month. Barnea is sitting over there in Jerusalem's Old City, and I'm sitting here in beautiful Nahariya. And through the magic of Skype, we hope to bring you both the video and the audio podcast each month.
You may be sitting on the Canaanite city discovered in Nahariya over the course of the past year. So
I'm surrounded by major tells here. I've got Tel Kabri to the north, I've got Tel Akko to the south, and to the east, there are more excavations going on than you care to shake a stick at.
Yeah, that's right. But in Nahariya, over the past year, it's developed more. They found massive Canaanite remains right where they're building new buildings. I think it's within 10 blocks of you easily. So you might be in Canaanite Nahariya.
We're definitely in Canaanite territory. The dig at Tel Kabri, which is really just a few minutes up the road. I think it's probably not more than 6 minutes up the road. At Tel Kabri has a major excavation going on over there where they found a wine production facility with over 3,000 containers of ancient wine from the Bronze Age.
I heard that for the archaeologists it was a very jarring experience.
It is, but this is really a Purim discussion if we're going to talk about wine. Really what we ought to be talking about is the 10 greatest finds of the past year, and one of them has to do with Hanukkah. Maybe, Barnea, you want to describe the Hashmona'i, the Hasmonean coin hoard that was found near Modi'in.
The coins used to stay in circulation a long time. A valuable coin that was struck in silver or in gold could easily be in circulation 100 years later. Also, some prutot, some bronze coins, small coins, could stay in circulation for that long. And so it makes it difficult just because you find a coin, even with a specific year on it, to know that that's saying anything about the context in which you find it. You know that it's after the date of striking that coin, but it could even be a century later. Now, what apparently happened here is a family in Modi'in, in modern-day Modi'in, it's a question of what it's called in ancient times, but in modern-day Modi'in had a hoard of valuable coins, and the coins are coins from the time of Hanukkah, after Hanukkah, Antiochus VII, I believe.
Nothing to do with Hortus.
Nothing to do with Herod. No,
No, you talked about this hoard that was found, but it's nothing to do with. Never mind.
No, and the that's what I'm saying. The event may have been hiding it from the Bar Kokhba revolt and hiding it from the Roman attack, but it doesn't mean that that's where it's from, because I hold on to coins for an awfully long time. So here, the coins are 2,140 years old. Have Antiochus VII is a parallel.
That's dating to the striking, not based on where they were found.
Yes. Is the last king of the Seleucid dynasty, and he is parallel to Shimon, the last remaining brother of the 5 brothers of the Maccabees, and Demetrius II is his brothers. Now, it was found in an area that was founded during the Hasmonean period, but now over 120 years later, let's say, because other coins said year 2 of the revolt and freedom of Zion. So this is apparently an area from the end of the Second Temple. There's another area in the area with finds from the Bar Kokhba revolt. So this fell in the Roman times. It was being hid to protect it from Romans, although the community comes from, and they're holding coins from literally a century or more earlier. So it's very cool that those you have coins from the time of Hanukkah found in Modi'in.
I just want to point out, and I think this is underlying the background of what you're saying, and that is, it's not just the coins could be used for a long time, right? The coins themselves have value for their weight, for the metallic weight that's involved. So the reason the coins stay in circulation, let's call it, right, is because the value of the metal doesn't change regardless of who the empire is. So the value of the metal, bronze, X weight in bronze is X weight in bronze. X weight in gold is X weight in gold. X weight in silver is X weight in silver. And I'm going to continue to use those coins for the value of the metal that they represent, not because of the coinage of the empire that I'm currently existing on. As opposed to, if I were now going to take coins from Europe and try to use them in circulation in the United States, I wouldn't do it because they're not legal tender in this country. I have to convert them into the local tender. That wasn't done because the metal was paramount, or the value of the metal was paramount, as opposed to who the minter or which empire represented.
Well, the archaeologist who excavated, his name is Tendler, not Tender, but I'm not sure if that's entirely correct. These coins were still legal tender. They are backed by the actual weight, but I believe that there are coins that, despite their weight, may not function as coinage if that kingdom was not accepted, if it was not used. I'm not sure if what you're saying...
Well, it's a point that's worth checking out, but in general, and this is part of why the value of when the Talmud talks about various coins, right, they're dealing with a very long period of time. Basically, they're dealing with coins from the period of the Mishnah through the end of the Talmud. That's hundreds of years, right? And a variety of different governments that are dealing with it.
But several weeks ago in the Daily Talmud page in Baba Metzia, it discussed, what if you have a coin which the national government, the kingdom, said is no longer legal tender, but locally people say, we continue to use it, or vice versa, it's from the national government, but locally don't you dare pull out a coin with that king's face on it, and it has potentially a different status. And what was very striking to us about this Gemara is that very day, this is just several weeks ago, India canceled certain denominations of bills. Now,
bills is different.
Yes,
because it's purely representative. There is no value to the paper itself.
Yes, but please look at the other side of the coin. What happened was that they did that in order to press a reset on their monetary system because of a tremendous amount of counterfeiting and other issues. But the normal person in a village in India uses these bills. So you basically removed their money. And how are they going to shop for basic food items? So you can certainly understand, I haven't checked this out, you can certainly understand the day after the local grocery store saying, please, I can still use this to deal with my local suppliers. Would you like to buy some milk? Go ahead. We're not paying attention to the fact that the big government said that all of our money and all of our kids, because we don't have the bigger ones which are there, and we don't have anything else in this corner of this vast country to replace it. We can't function without money. We're going to accept it. I remember reading maybe a decade ago about a community in Alaska that was still using a $1.43 check that somebody had once written and various other items that certainly had no meaning and no backing everywhere else. But since it rotated locally, everybody accepted it. It was a fantastic article. Maybe it was a National Geographic. You knew this check could no longer be cashed. It had no backing, but locally right? That check moves around between the guy who got
So
the
that
fish.
check in 57 cents was worth $2 locally.
Right. That's right. That's right. So that was one find. And what was nice also is that it was found in a controlled archaeological dig. So you know that none of them are fake. It was found in the context of where a Jewish family had hid it, which made it very exciting. You know, you were touching on this family's hopes and dreams. And they never made it back. They never made it back in one of those revolts. What we're responding to, as you introduced, is that Biblical Archaeological Review put their top 10 archaeological discoveries. I picked a few others out as well. There's right next to my house, a 5-minute walk away, they found, just on this topic, they found a gold Nero coin. And it was minted on the year 56, 57.
Let's put Nero into context. He's one of the 4 emperors just prior to the destruction of the Second Temple.
And it's found in a house here, which is a Jewish house based on the mikvahs. It's a very valuable coin. Roman, as the article points out, Roman soldiers would get 3 gold coins on a payday, but they couldn't really use it locally because you couldn't go into a store with something that big. Nobody would have
change on hand
for it. So it's part of what you stocked away or you looked for when you were in a major city, which you could break it down. This too was just recently in the Talmud of Bava Metzia discussing when I put the sanctity of the second tithe money onto coins and I'm using it to travel to Jerusalem, can I transfer the sanctity, the value of my fruit onto bronze, copper coins, and then
maybe just explain that concept a little bit.
I shall. But can I transfer coins onto a bigger coin, bring it to Jerusalem, then break it down to coins again because I'm losing money on the money changers? 4 out of every 7 years in Israel, after you've given to the priest, after you've given first fruits when relevant, and after you've given to the Kohen, to the priest, and after you've given 10% to the Levi, and then the Levi gives 10% of what he gets to the priest, but that's no longer your business. 10% you take and eat in Jerusalem, or, depending on the circumstance, you redeem onto money for its value, and you take that money to Jerusalem and you buy a hot chocolate. Now,
that money has a special status. It can't be used for whatever you want. You've transferred the holiness, so to speak, of that agricultural material onto the coin, and that can be redeemed in Jerusalem.
And it's best redeemed onto hot chocolate. Now, hot chocolate should be made by melting pure chocolate on a fondue and stirring in cream. Sometimes here we have to make do with hot milk and a chocolate bar.
We don't make do, we make fondue.
Very nice. And some people think they're having hot chocolate by having hot water in the powder. We don't deal with that. It would not be appropriate to use second type money, Meister Sheni money, and such hot chocolate, but it would still work.
You'd have to be cocoa to think that that's hot chocolate.
You have to be cocoa. Very nice. So let's say that over the course of some months, each time I redeemed onto money, now I have a full bag full of heavy change that I have to carry. I'd like to convert that into 1 gold coin. And then when I'm here in Jerusalem, I'll change that gold coin. Can I change it at once? Can I change it part by part? Every time I change money, it's costing me money that otherwise would have been used for buying fruit because of the exchanges. But it makes it functional. And the Mishnah and the Talmud discuss, and there's discussions, not everybody agrees, what am I allowed to do in the transport? And how functional do I make you to make it easy to deal with, or I'm going to have to schlep at one point or another so that I'm conserving the actual money. Fascinating discussion also recently in the Daily Talmud page in Bava Metzia, but it's discussed a few places. So that a Kohen would have a gold Nero coin does not mean that Kohen was in the service of the Roman military army, but it is a sign of wealth that anybody would have something that would be worth so much, so many silver coins, etc., into 1 gold coin. It could be that it was is something that they earned. It could be it came from taxes. We know that they...
And it could be carrying this holy redemption value on it for being used in Jerusalem.
It's possible that it was from that. The suggestion of the article is that some Roman came, or somebody came from Rome, and that's how it came here. That's very interesting. Right? Now, how does that coin travel? And in the context, how fast did it travel?
So basically, like modern cell phones, Roman coins could have Roman charges.
That was very nice. I'm not sure if everybody's capable of understanding that joke, but I liked it very much.
Everybody is capable of understanding that joke.
The Roman Caesars issued coins the moment they took office. It's part of how they announced, "I am here," and especially since the assassination attempts.
But not only, they could also be commemorating a military victory that was undertaken, right? They were often minted in honor of their rise to power, but also particular events could trigger a new run of coins.
Yes, but the Caesar always immediately had a portrait, had a coin done to announce it's there. There were one or two people, we weren't sure if they fully existed, and we just recently found a second coin of some Caesar with a very, very brief reign.
And a Roman governor of Judea from the time of the Bar Kokhba revolt, which was also one of the big finds of this year.
Oh, so we're transitioning now. That one is a dedicatory stone with his name and calls him the procurator of Judea. And we know that just afterwards came the Bar Kokhba revolt, and the Romans canceled this independent area, apparently, so as not to say, okay, let's take that one back, and made it part of a broader area of ruled from Syria, and removed this position for the time being. So it's a moment before the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 130s, and he is apparently the last one. It was found in the sea. People who know. I was with such a person once. They know the waves. They know how to look at the sea, and they can tell when it's worth getting out there and looking on the seafloor that something is clear. They instantly run to do that.
So I can tell you, it's become part of my routine now. After a big storm up here in the north, because I'm just a hop, skip, and a jump from the sea edge, right? That when the waves come crashing, all kinds of new material gets deposited on the seashore, new seashells, pieces of metal, all kinds of interesting flotsam and jetsam, right, can be found right after a storm on the seacoast.
Yeah, I saw you posted something. It's a very long name, but Gargilius Antiquus, governor of the province of Judea, as well as something of the province of Syria, and patron of the city of Dor. It is 7/10 of a ton. It is 2.5 feet high. As found, it might have been originally bigger. That same name was also found 70 years ago, almost, at Tel Dor. And at that time, scholars debated what would the rule over, was it Syria or Judea? This new stone says Judea. And Asher Yasser Landau says, for the first time we can state with certainty the name of a Roman prefect, the type of governor of Judea during the critical period leading up to the Bar Kokhba revolt. And this is the only second time that the name Judea has appeared in any inscription from the Roman period. They wanted to wipe out that name, so they're not expecting to find another one. The other one is it's the Pontius Pilate stone.
But the name is only a short while later that the decision is made by Hadrian and his administration to change the name. Before that, right, even on the Medba map and in other places, the name Judea appears. It's only a little bit later, following the revolt, that the name becomes, so to speak, persona non grata.
Right. The earlier stone is from 100 years earlier. Pontius Pilate is 100 years earlier in this one. So only two inscriptions have been found with that name, Judea. Now we have a piece of wine jar found in one of the three garbage pits in Masada that calls Herod king of Judea and under the Romans. It's being sent from Spain. So we know that name was used, and in the price freeze of Diocletian in the year 300, I hope I'm saying it right. Huh?
Diocletian
in the year 300, it lists Judea glass. So the name is known, and the dates were called Judea. There's no question that they were using that. But in terms of an inscription found on a physical object, as also on coins, Judea Capta, that's not the question. But as an inscription, it's only the second inscription found. Pick another one from the 10, David. What would you like to talk about?
Oh, there's so much to choose from. I'd like to talk about toilets.
Okay.
All right. Now, we actually produced a piece about an ancient latrine that was found in Lachish, right? But this latrine, right, despite most other latrines that are found, was never in use. Why not?
Right. Well, there are other choices here, so we're not flush out of topics. But the point of this one apparently is, as Sargonor pointed out of the Antiquities Authority, a reflection to what Yehu did in Samaria. Yehu canceled or made an embarrassment of idolatrous places in Samaria by turning them into bathhouses. A very interesting Talmudic discussion.
Not just bathhouses, but bathrooms.
Bathrooms, yes, specifically bathrooms, water closets, because there's a Kri and a Ksiv. The Jewish tradition has a way to read that verse, which is different than the way for writing it. And it's more polite in the reading than in the script. And the Talmud has an opinion that, no, don't do it the nice way. When you're making fun of idolatry, you're allowed to be disgusting. And Sarita the Motzayim, that which comes out of them, make it much, much more graphic.
Which is fascinating because certainly some of the idolatrous practices included bathroom routines as part of the practice of the worship of that god itself.
We have that as the Jewish tradition of the Pur. I don't know. I haven't researched. I don't know if we have archaeological evidence of that. But here you see that it was clearly an idolatrous place. They had cultic vessels and altars. The altar corners were smashed, right, which is significant. And then this toilet was installed with chemical tests being done below the hole, with no finds of any coprins, no find of any remains, which means it was never used. But you walked into the city...
And a tinier bowl than that you'll never find.
And you saw this very striking, well-made, powerful block of stone, which is the toilet. And yes, refer people to our previous LandMinds interview, which is up on the website, and perhaps elsewhere, which Sargonor actually shows it. So I find it very striking that I think we mentioned in that interview, but I want to reiterate it since touring around since then. I was always taught that there are 2 or 4 or 6 chambers, 8 chambers. There's a series of gateways at the gate of a city, so that if an attacker breaks through the first, they can be bottled up and held in the second with people throwing down arrows from the top. And it's basically a series of defensive rooms. Now, it could be they had coffee and tea there, or a lounge for the soldiers, or kept a stack of apples for noshing there. But we've never found something like this where you see, no, there was an idol in there, and there was in another one, there was a very beautiful seat. And we know that the judges would sit in the exit there, and you see it's magnificent with an apparent rolled over stone with an edge, carved stone in another room. So you see that for the first time, we find usages of these series of chambers from the main door. I don't know. I don't want to claim it for sure. I don't know. I don't recall ever hearing of anything found before. We do have in Tel Dan, you see a bench all the way around a courtyard that's by the gate. That, yes. But in the series of these three rooms and these chambers, which were already assumed to be defensive, I don't recall from the biblical period anything of the sort being found where you see in one room the chair and that it was being used, and in another room you see the idols and then negated by the latrine.
I think you have to somewhat project, right, that there's an identity to the chamber, to the gates and the chambers of a city that was not just defensive. So your introduction talked about the defensive use of the chambers in a time of war. But in a time of peace, these rooms were being used by the judges of the city, and maybe for other purposes as well. And we have many biblical references, and not just references, but specific descriptions of the gates, the judges sitting in the gates of the city. You have to assume that the furniture and the other paraphernalia that would have been used in a court of law would have also been there. And
Yes,
especially if you include, as sometimes we do, that the king was also one of the judges, it's reasonable to assume that a throne would have been set up in the gate of a city, especially if we know that the king or kings sat there as well.
The working assumption is that although 3 could be a court, that there would be a court of 23 of the city. That's the working assumption. It could be their sources on it. But in any event, in Tel Dan, after you pass the courtyard and you come in one door, not a series like this, there is a large courtyard. It's difficult to make out completely because there's trees there which they didn't uproot, but there's a large area. There's a bench going around at least two walls, and then there are indentations, and 1 or 2 beautiful stones were found which would indicate, and they've recreated it, a chair for the leader to sit in a more royal position. So I have a very large open area which would allow for a team of judges to be sitting around and for people to come and have a discussion. I have a courtroom entrance. These rooms are only several feet across and several feet depth. They don't allow for several people to be sitting and for discussions to be held. On either side, they're not that big. So you would assume that, yes, every city had a Sanhedrin, every city had a court, and in the more important place, or if the king was visiting, the king would lead the court. But that we haven't found. There's maybe 2 traces of such a sitting area. This, to find it in the chambers, which are to the right.
I agree with you. I'm telling you, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you to find features that would indicate usage beyond military usage of those rooms, assuming they're from the same period of time.
But we found a few dozen cities from the Iron Age Jerusalem destroyed so that nobody had a chance to take things out or move furniture or what have you. As far as I know, maybe it wasn't recognized. Maybe things were taken out before people knew what to look for. Nothing of this sort has ever been found. It's worth checking, but I thought that this find of Lachish is a first in that sense.
But
now,
Lachish is an exceptional site beyond just what was found in the gate. Our ability to recreate the palace on the top of the Tel, to the best of my knowledge, is, if not the best, among the best, where we have the entire layout of it's the plan, the building, the architectural plan, so to speak. We see how it all fit together there. That level of preservation is very, very high. Most other sites, I'll give you an example. In Kayafa, in the gate area, right, all of the rooms, the chambers of the gate area in the first gate area were closed off and used secondarily in the Persian period. 700 years later, so to be able to find remains from the primary, and those are basically the only two periods, but anything that you would have found from the first period is likely gone by the second period. In the level of breakdown, so to speak, of the second gate, there's even less. Right, much more reconstruction had to take place in the area of the second gate, right, at Kayafa. Now, I can't tell you for places like Chatzor and Megiddo and their gates. We have to look at and read the reports and to see. But I would have to imagine that in multiple period tells, like these sites, right, those rooms in the gates, those chambers in the gates, were used multiple times in different periods for multiple purposes.
Very, very nice. Your point at Kayafa is well taken. I'm not expecting to find what was originally there because it was reused. Very good. I think I have right here. I gave a tour last week of ancient Gezer, which also has these grand gates, and I was preparing other sites to see. We also went to Kayafa that day, but I just happened to have here the relatively new English edition of Professor David Oshishkin's Book of Lachish, available for the Israel Exploration Society, and there's a dedication here.
This is the commercial break for the podcast.
Yes, and there's a dedication here to me that my son Achliel got for me from Professor Oshishkin of the book on 17/7/2016. That is now last year, and the publication date is 2014. The Hebrew came out a little bit beforehand.
It is so last year.
Yeah, it is so last year. And I'm just seeing if I can show what you were referring to. Okay, and Lachish is from the single greatest sites to show anything here. The Palace Fort schematic. Is that coming out on the screen? Will that be visible?
Somewhat. You know, if we can get a budget together for these podcasts, a sponsor, if someone out there would like to sponsor a podcast, we can edit these in with graphics and pictures and photos and things like that.
When you
that
get
would
the
be
book,
fantastic.
Page 254, page 256, you'll be able to get
a little hard to make out on the video. Okay, very good.
To come on the tour. Okay, moving on. We were approached years ago by Herschel Shanks of Biblical Archaeological Review that a stone workshop was identified in the Galilee. And nobody knew at that time that stone vessels, which are impervious to ritual defilement, existed outside of the Jerusalem area.
By the way, you only get one of those expressions probably per podcast. You can only say impervious to ritual defilement one time in a podcast. After that, you have to save it for the next edition.
Okay. And he said, I would be willing, the bar would be willing to kick in funds towards the excavation. At that time, we were not able to move that forward. The report says that indeed, Bar is one of the contributors to that excavation, which has made wonderful progress and has wonderful finds. I'm very happy that it comes, but for our listeners and now for our viewers, to know that same thing happened to Eilat Mazar. She gave a talk, and a decade later, somebody says, do you really mean that? Okay, so I'll fund it for many hundreds of thousands of dollars.
There's no question that Herschel Shanks has raised the bar on biblical archaeology.
Yeah. And he passed the bar because he's a lawyer.
That's true, too.
Right? I didn't know I could come up with a comeback. But I'd like to say that you and I were just invited in several months ago to the Antiquities Authority, and Moshe Ajami said, you had to dig in Yavne, you had problems with how others handled...
Politics. We had problems with politics.
And And you are now invited back full force to renew excavations on two conditions. One is that you must use students, but that's something that you helped pioneer in the country 20 years ago. And secondly, you have to have the funding in the bank. So also, these things come back. All of a sudden, you're able to do something that you've been planning for years. I remember we sat with Amnon Bentor some years ago. His
excavator of Chatzor.
Yes, and this book on Masada, a renewed book on Masada, had just come out that day, the day before. He hadn't even seen it yet. We had him autograph it. And he said, look, I'm in my 70s, and I have to worry every year, where's the funding going to come to do the dig? And that's terrible. And you and I discussed that the government should have a fund that, a site of a certain importance, or an excavator, a scientist who's contributed to society for decades after a certain stage, automatically say, look, what you want to do is covered. Or for this site, the budget is covered for an ongoing excavation. It shouldn't be the worries of scraping things together. You want to add to it? Add to it by all means. But to know that an excavation that will continue, and it's not just the digging, it's the scientific processing and the publishing, it's a package, that should be something which is standard throughout the country. So we've experienced that ourselves. Also, years later, all of a sudden funds came in and we were able to jump further, or now we have the opportunity to jump and we have to look for it. We've covered almost everything.
I think so. Well, we didn't talk about the Philistine cemetery.
We didn't talk about the Philistine cemetery. I have a personal story about that. I had a tour with Alan and Fran Broder in Ashkelon, given by Daniel Master, and he was very careful. I wanted to see the current dig, because it was the last week they were digging after years of digging, and he very carefully showed us other things and not that. And then the next week came the announcement, so now we understand they were so concerned that if anybody would be talking about the fact that bodies would be found, what the reactions could be, even though these are clearly Philistine bodies, and always held respectfully. I've been involved in I was a supervisor. Because of, I won't say where right now, but I was a supervisor of a dig where human bodies were found. They had to be exhumed because pipes were going to be running right through where they were buried. The bones were taken out. They were measured. The cranial skull was measured to get as much information as possible. And then they were repackaged and put down right below where they had been found beforehand. So they were being reburied in that burial ground. And also, we cut a line. You know, you want to find out as much as you can. We cut a line, and in this particular type of cemetery from 300 years ago, there would be a burial stone or stones right above the body. And it was a shaped stone. So we cut down on the side of this street, of a modern street, and you saw the edge of such a stone sticking out, which means we could have dug into the ground and pulled out that body and then put it back. And the archaeologist said, and Israel Antiquities archaeologist, right, we don't touch it. It's not going to be disturbed by the pipes. So even though we could learn something, he didn't say that, but it means even though we could learn something, it stays there. We have no need to disturb that grave. Here it's because anyway it's going to be run through. So if anything, instead of being chewed up by a bulldozer, the bones are now intact safely below the level where the new sewage lines were put in. And the bulldozers came in right after we took the pictures and everything. And Isaac Cohen had to be very careful. Sephardic Kohanim can't touch Gentile bones, but they can lean over them. They can be in the cemetery. I had to be careful not to lean over, and I was directing the workers what to do, and he wasn't listening to me. The man who was older than me. I said, you don't articulate the bones that way in this. And then, thank God, I was justified because I'm a rookie, yeah? This is my training. The senior excavator came over and yelled at them, that's not the way to do it. You have to do it like this. So I said, okay, I did that. I was right. And You have to very carefully with a brush articulate, because they want to see, you can tell if by careful examination, was the person murdered? Was the person sick? Was it a religious burial in a particular form? Was it a deformity in the body, and therefore certain things were placed in certain ways? What is the significance by knowing exactly how the person was buried under war pressure and sort of cramped into a place, or just jumbled in? Like, you remember that story of Amadeus, you just see his body tossed in. So we learn a lot, and historical records, and respect for it, and teach everybody else what to look for the next time by knowing exactly the way. So all these bones were fully lying down and lying on their side with their hands near to the top. Okay, so you know that. That's, even if you didn't have a coin or anything else, you might know now that's a certain type of burial 300 years ago, just from the way it's done.
So, I mean, what triggered this was our discussion about the cemetery of the Philistines. What was particularly noteworthy about this find?
Well, the Philistines are a little bit amorphous. As we know them from texts, we have pottery that we associate with Philistines. We are in a number of digs. What comes to mind, of course, is Tel Asafi in Gat, but there's major digs in Ashkelon, in Ashdod, in Ekron. They're not digging now, but there were, and here you're able to see who they are. You can do ancient DNA tests. You can try and track where they came from. You can see their personal effects. Let me see if I can get something more specific. But you know that you're dealing now with the Philistines. You have Philistines in front of you, and you can learn more about them instead of wondering.
Well, so that's because it's the first Philistine cemetery ever found. But is there anything distinctive about the way their burial practices were done, right, that says or calls attention to itself as being distinctive?
Let me think through that. There are already, there's an issue. And the issue is where the Phoenicians stop and where the Philistines begin. And can you demarcate that on the Levant coastline in Israel? So, for example, the Ephraim Stern or Amnon Bentor has a difference in loom weights. That somewhere along the Sharon Plain is the division. And a Haifa University archaeologist, what's her name?
I'm going to say this, and I don't mean it as a pun, even though it comes out that way. There is a chafifa, right?
Overlap.
Yes. So with chof, right, chafifa is related to the coast. But what we have is that at times the Philistines do extend very far north into what we would call Phoenician territory, and the Phoenicians at times extend very far south, and their influence can be felt even without their territorial inclusion, right? For example, in the time of King Solomon, right? That the Phoenicians are coming south, they're trading with Israel, so we see the Phoenicians often very distantly from their territory. So we have overlap between both of these cultures, and then there are areas where the Philistines are adopting the rites and the idolatrous practices, or incorporating, as Professor Armer discusses, right? With, for example, the god Dagon, who can refer to both the fish god and to the grain god. And so that when the Phoenicians and the Philistines cross-pollinate, so to speak, so do their cultic practices.
Well, the Phoenicians were at one time even given Jaffa, which is very far south on the coast. So therefore the dating here of when you're talking about has to be very precise, because you're dealing with a period of hundreds of years, and you can't lump it all together, and you can't lump all Philistines and Phoenicians together. There can be distinctive differences between Tyre and Sidon, for example, and Dor, and how far did that influence go? The kings competed with each other of the different cities commercially, not war with each other as far as I know, but commercially. So in Cyprus, they're competing markets. And the Philistines come from a wide range of origins, according to our mayor, even as far as Italy. So you have to be very careful. What's happening here is, and this the article stresses, is that unequivocally Ashkelon is Philistine. And so I would say I was leading up to that. So in earlier digs in Achziv and elsewhere, my friend Adam Kaplan did his master's on identifying in the Upper Galilee where an Iron Age Israelite graves stop, where do the Phoenician graves come, and can you tell based on the burial practice in whose sphere the different cities are? And he mapped it all out. And that master's is not yet published, but I believe it was already accepted and he got it. And in the brand new Israel Exploration Journal that came to my mail yesterday, number 2 of 2016, no, there he's talking about Megiddo, I take it back. But he's now a published author, as of yesterday. My friend Adam Kaplan, who came to Tel Aviv University and over the copy machine met Ella of Caesarea. And so he now will soon have a Philistine wife. They're getting married May 5th in Laguna Hills, something.
A Philistine wife. Unbelievable.
Yes, and she's working in the Oriental Institute in
Very
Chicago.
Samsonic.
Right. She's working in the Oriental Institute in Chicago. So that's a shidduch made in the Archaeological Library copy machine, although they're both very original people. But to get back to it, that's the topic of it, by detecting the differences in burial styles. And I had the pleasure of helping comment and edit his master, so that's where I got a little bit of familiarity with it. And then I did a paper on Phoenician architecture, which I hope to turn into an article. So there's something that's been identified in burial practices. That's Phoenician. Here, it says something specifically here. The Ashkelon Philistine Cemetery yielded, I'm quoting, many fully articulated skeletons, as opposed to letting the body decay, gathering the bones, and putting them to receptacle, which is the way that the Israelites also did, and apparently the Canaanites as well. The Mount of Olives has burial rooms, which David Ashishkin mapped in the 1970s, the necropolis of Jerusalem. There's a shelf cut into the mountain with a place for the head, similar to the tombs that Gabi Barkai dug in Katef Hinnom, which is getting some attention right now. He was there yesterday because there's some excavation work doing around in the area where he found the amulets of the Quranic blessings. You see, you lay the body down as so in the depression. You give time for the flesh to decay, and then the bones are put together in the Ma'aseifa. This is not that way. This is over 200 fully articulated skeletons. Sometimes individuals laid on top of previous burials with their own grave goods, but without disturbing the ones below. And now they're trying to see is the relationship, because now with ancient DNA, you can check the bones and you can see if there's a connection between the people. Now I'm looking at a picture with a person lying on his back with his hands clasped in front of him like this.
Which looks like a modern burial site.
Huh?
Which looks very much like a modern burial technique by our standards.
Right, and there's a small jug on it. So all of the as Daniel Master says, after decades of studying what the Philistines left behind, we have finally come face to face with the people themselves, and they could do their origins. Now the Torah says, the Bible says that they came from Kaftor, like in Amos 9:7, and like in the story of Noah. We'll be able now to connect it in many ways to other finds throughout the Aegean, throughout the Mediterranean, and here in Israel. And they are doing DNA testing, radiocarbon dating, and biological distance studies, which means the degree of genetic relatedness. And that's absolutely fascinating. And obviously different scholars are involved in different places. So Sherry Fox is the head forensic anthropologist, and she's already been able to see from the bones, they had this illness, they suffered this trauma, what is the lifespan? There don't seem to be a lot of babies. The expectation is that they would have experienced high rates of infant mortality. Is there a different place for burying babies, like in the brothel that was also found, I think in Ashdod or Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ashdod, right? That's from a later time, but maybe there's a different place for babies, or maybe we're wrong, and maybe they ate so well and had such good health that you don't have it. Now, there's something very unique that I learned from Daniel Master.
And with this, you got to wrap it up because we're already 10 minutes over our planned time.
That he pointed out that in the Bible, there's very few cities that have chutzot. And chutzot he understands as markets. And he says that in Ashkelon, it's so big in the Middle Bronze period, in the Canaanite period, that the markets are included within the city. And there's your devoting area to the guarded area of the city for markets. And that's a sign of Ashkelon's power. Only Jerusalem, Damascus, Samaria, very few cities in the Bible get that credit. Is there something so let's just close them. There were there were four other finds, we'll just mention them. A huge Roman gateway to Pan was found in Sasita overlooking the Kinneret, maybe from the Hadrianic period, if I recall correctly. And they found a rare bronze mask there, but that was last year. But now they have a gateway, and you can go onto the site and you can spin around a 3D image of it. In Chukov, Jody Magnus continues to find other biblical scenes in the synagogue's floors. Noah's Ark, Exodus, a fish swallowing up an Egyptian soldier. Really, really cool image. Very critical, which may relate to something I'm going to spend years working on, is the third wall of Jerusalem from the time of the Second Temple is right near City Hall, right? And they found remains of the revolt.
In the northern part of the city.
And
it's considered to be the northern part of the ancient city. That third wall is towards the northwest.
I see it as more west, but that's fine. And the last thing is absolutely fascinating. In what used to be the Givati parking lot, where excavations are going on this minute of First and Second Temple period Jerusalem, already some time ago they found a building that was destroyed by the Babylonians, where they found a number of seals. They haven't talked about everything they found, but one of them is a seal about this big of a semi-precious stone with two holes so it could be inserted into a ring or a brooch. And it has a woman's name, Eliana Ben Gael, I believe her name, Bat Gael. It has a woman's name on it. So you have a First Temple period woman who was very important, and it's not from a minute before the destruction. It seems to be from a little bit earlier, at least according to Christopher Ralston, and there's other names that appear there. And we have a woman like that called Babata from the time of the end of the Second Temple. We found many of her business dealings in one of the caves.
That's Herodian. That's from Bar Kokhba period.
Right. This is a First Temple period woman who's important enough that she has her own seal. She's signing things. She's doing things. It's a breakthrough in that sense. And we've often found clay seals. This is the stamp that makes the seal. But I just want to give a holdover from last year just because the visitors can see it. A seal found by Eilat Mazar near the Temple Mount, just next to the road that runs where the buses and cars run. Hezekiah, Achaz, son is assumed, Achaz, king of Judah, is now on display at the Davidson Center right inside the Dung Gate. It's absolutely real because it was found in the controlled excavation. It was only realized last year what it actually said. I think it's the most thrilling, authentic clay seal to be found so far. So in the region around, a few hundred feet from each other, you have here remains of the administration of the kings of Judah, of the biblical Jerusalem, then destroyed by the Babylonians.
What's the number? Maybe you know this offhand, because I don't know what the number is, but it's already considerable, right? The number of stamps of known characters from the Bible that have been found to date.
It depends if you count those which are found from excavations and registered, or those which are in the antiquities market. I have downstairs a corpus of inscriptions. Shmuel Achitub recently removed seals from the new edition of biblical inscriptions because of the risk of forgeries. So if you're ready to accept everything.
No, let's leave out. Let's leave out the ones that are just from the antiquities market, from the black market. Just the ones found from controlled excavations.
I'm not sure.
Let's find that out. I think that's an interesting factoid to have.
I just saw a publication of 260 seals from one person's collection.
But that includes both.
I didn't look into depth, but 260 clay stamps and other signs just from one person's collection. So there are many hundreds from the antiquities market.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking the number of characters that are mentioned in the Bible that we have at least one seal from that person from a controlled excavation.
So this was done, I don't remember how to pronounce his name, but Barr printed his article. Lawrence Miutiak, I don't know how to pronounce it properly, did a very careful work and gave 3 parameters for saying I'm absolutely talking about that this physical object is the same as the character in the Bible. And he had 51. And if you go to 2 parameters, which means it's also very reasonable, it goes to more. I'm just showing you this, the Shmuel Achitev's book, inscriptions dating from the First Temple period. In the newer edition, he left out seals. And in this one, maybe he left them out here also of the English. Yeah, he left them out. In the English one, they do not appear. They do not appear. You have to get an earlier edition. I heard him say that. We were in a car together coming from a conference. He said, I left it out of the second edition because to get into the forgeries, is Baruch ben Neriah's seal real or not? That's tricky. But Gemariel ben Shaphan, controlled excavation. Gedayahu ben Pashur, controlled excavation. Yoachal ben Shalemyah, controlled excavation. The last 2 from Milat Nazar, the earlier one from Yigal Shiloh, all found near each other in the city of David. And just a cute line. And 2 of them are mentioned in Jeremiah 38:1. Eilat Mazar says, if I find the third one of the 4 people that threw Yirmiyahu in the pit, I'm not going to announce it because the reason she must be forging them. Nobody can find 3 people out of 1 verse.
Right. Well, that brings us to the end of this month's LandMinds podcast. We'll invite you back next month. You're free to share this far and wide if you're so inclined. And we want to wish you a warm winter and hope to see you again in the future. Over and out.
Shalom.